I'd like to invite us to find a seat so we can begin our service. I'd like to invite everyone to please silence your cell phones. The Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean praised is the judge of truth. And so we're going to begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition, and I invite you to please repeat after me. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Praise is the judge of truth, and repeat after me. Adonai Natan V'Adonai Lakach Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Adonai has given and Adonai has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. Begin with Psalm 15. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai mi yagur be'olecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha. Holech tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavo. Lo ragal al leshono, lo asal re'ehu ra'a, v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Nivzeh beinav nimas v'et yirei Adonai yechabed, nishba le'ara v'lo yamir. Kaspo lo natan b'neshech v'shochad, al naki lo lakach, osei lo yimot le'olam. Psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue, do no evil to others, do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. And now Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binodeh sheyarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim. The Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Barbara Lynn Tiemann Frank was born on September 9th, 1936, in Canton, Ohio, to Hy and Bernice Tiemann. An only child, her first years were in Ohio, but then following job opportunities, her parents moved with her to Los Angeles when she was 5 or 6 years old, settling in the heavily Jewish Fairfax neighborhood. Barbara graduated from Fairfax High School in 1954 and enrolled at UCLA to get a general studies degree. At the age of 19, she got engaged to Steve Zeman. The invitations were already sent out, but the intense involvement of Steve's parents left her with a bad feeling. And so she broke off the engagement and transferred to Berkeley, which was the right move, but we'll come back to Steve. On September 9, 1956, the day of Barbara's 20th birthday, she went on a blind date set up by some friends. And that's when she met Al Frank. Al was 5 years older, attending Bolt Law School at Berkeley. They fell in love and got married in Los Angeles the following June. Al and Barbara were well suited for each other, with different but complementary personalities. They had some shared interests, but they also had their own passions. Al had a job as a teaching assistant for a class at Berkeley, but he brought home all of the papers for Barbara to grade. She was an excellent writer and really good at grammar, so they were a good team. After Al graduated, he was offered a job with a labor attorney in San Jose. They had no intention of staying. To Barbara, San Jose was a backwater. Before it became Silicon Valley, it was Cowtown, she would quip. Barbara had come from a more traditional family, while Al's family was quite assimilated. And she refused to visit his family's home in San Francisco during the wintertime until they agreed to take down the Christmas tree. They joined Temple Emmanuel and had close friends at both Emmanuel and here at Sinai. Soon after arriving in San Jose, while Barbara was pregnant with Dale, they met another young couple who were also expecting at a prenatal class. And that young couple was Ruth and Al Sporer. Ruth was pregnant with Amy. And they would remain lifelong friends. Dale was born in 1958. Sometime in the 1960s, the Franks began to have Shabbat dinner every single week with the Ellenbergs and the Sporers, a tradition that continued for decades. And at Dale's urging a few years later, the Franks eventually joined Congregation Sinai, where all of Dale's best friends were. Barbara and Al became very active in the Jewish community all the way back in the 60s. They volunteered with ORT, the Jewish Community Center, the Jewish Federation, and Hadassah. Al served as the president of the Jewish Community Council, the precursor to the Federation. Barbara was on the JCC board and was active in the women's division. Dale remembers his mother volunteering for a B'nai B'rith women's organization program called Dolls for Democracy and Diversity. She would bring these dolls that were made of heroes of democracy into schools where she would deliver speeches to the students. Dale remembers going with her and particularly recalls the dolls for Albert Schweitzer, Jackie Robinson, and Jonas Salk. In the 1960s, Barbara served on the Soviet Jewish Committee. With Dale in tow, she would attend protests on behalf of Soviet Jewry, including demonstrations outside the Russian consulate, or the Soviet consulate in San Francisco. Barbara had a particular talent for solving problems and finagling bureaucracy. When Jews began to immigrate from the former Soviet Union in the 1970s, Barbara single-handedly took charge of the Jewish community's welcoming and support of the newly arriving families. There was no existing infrastructure to handle this. Jewish family services did not yet exist. So Barbara would find apartments for the newly arrived refugees. She would solicit furniture donations and organize volunteers to collect them. She got hold of a truck from Goldman's Electric Company and found warehouse space to store the supplies that were too big to fit in her garage at home. When families arrived, Barbara would help them get settled, taking them to appointments, to the DMV. She even let them practice driving using her own car. The phone would ring at all hours of the night. Dale would be sent to parties all the time with the new immigrants. Barbara and Al were passionate lovers and supporters of Israel. They went for the first time in 1969 and thought that they might even make Aliyah. But it was Dale who would be the one to take that step. The agreement was for Dale to finish his degree before going. But when he secretly applied and was accepted to Hebrew University, it was to Barbara that he broke the news. The more strong-willed and fiery parent, he also knew that she would support him no matter what. "Do you want me to talk to your father?" she asked when he told her. "If you want to have Jewish grandchildren, it's a good thing if your kids make Aliyah," was her feeling. That was in 1978. Barbara loved her daughter-in-law, Meira, and she was so proud that they had settled and made a home in Israel. When their first grandson, Noam, was born in 1984, Al and Barbara bought an apartment in Jerusalem. She loved going to Israel. She even made Aliyah herself at one point and owned a car there, but she never wanted to live there full-time. I'm honored now to introduce Dale and Meira to share memories of their mother.
Barbara, Lynn, Team, and Frank. My mom was quite a force of nature. How could you not love her style, her attitude to life, and her intellect? My mom loved me so much. She always called me her favorite son. With her, of course, witty, well-timed sense of humor. All I can say is that with my parents, I won the lotto big time. I had off-the-charts parents that always made me feel loved. My mom lived by the golden rule of giving unconditional love to her family and close group of friends. I want to talk about three aspects of my mom: her love of family, her personality traits that I loved, and her love of Judaism. My mom was absolutely a family-first person. Though an only child, my mom had an extended family. She loved me and was protective of me until the end. Safti, or Granny Goose as she loved to be called, she loved my boys to the moon and back, as she would always say, though I think it was more like Pluto. Our three boys made it here for the funeral despite having babies, job commitments, a war, and busy lives because of the deep relationship that they had. And I also want to thank Orit and Ayelet for enabling both Barak and Chovav to come with having quite little babies at home to make this trek for us. My mom and my sons forged a 30 to 40-year-old deep relationship despite us being in Israel and my parents being in the United States. My mom loved and had a deep relationship with her 6 great-grandchildren, becoming even more bonded to them the past 2 years in Israel. She always gave and received hugs and kisses from her great-grandchildren at our family get-togethers. For our grandchildren, the concept of Safti's house in Tel Aviv symbolized the fun family meeting place for Shabbat and holiday meals and hang time with the cousins. My mom loved Meira so much and loved to shop for the ultimate purple or turquoise gift for her. My parents had a very special relationship with the whole Melamed Cohen clan, and Meira will talk about this. But our parents, Meira's parents and mine, loved each other and respected each other greatly. And my mom, Giveret Barbara, had a very special and close relationship with Meira's father, Menashe Zichrono Livracha. And they clocked a lot of time together, both being widowed at pretty young ages. My parents came to San Jose with literally nothing and few to no acquaintances, thinking this was a temporary sojourn on a journey back to the big city, San Francisco or LA. They forged a deep family community of friends and extended family. My mom loved Amy, Julie, Steve, Gary, David, and Chaim almost like her own. I want to reflect on a few memories of my mom on helping me at different stages of my life. So not the first memory I have, because I have a pretty good memory, goes back pretty good, well. One day in first grade, I'm walking home from school, and with my buddy John. And John was always getting into trouble, and we only really interacted on the walk home from school. And we lived over in Cambrian Park, and we were walking home from Carleton School, and we had about a half a mile kilometer walk to get home. And John had big brothers and was not a naive only child like myself, so he was a sophisticated first grader, okay? And on the way, we suddenly meet John starts talking to this group of big boys, 4th and 5th graders. And I'm innocently happy that I'm in this older social circle. I remember this whole thing going on. And suddenly things turn sour very fast. And these big boys start to really knock the crap out of John, okay? And then one of the kids looks at me and comes to me and grabs me like a Karate Kid move and starts to flip me over his shoulder. And while this is going on, my mom comes out of nowhere, appears my savior. Like a flash, my mom cruises up in her 1964 yellow Buick Special. It was a very special car. I think she nearly ran over the curb parking. She bolts over to us like a lioness Gal Gadot Wonder Woman, yelling something I cannot repeat in the synagogue at the kids, which is no surprise to people that knew my mom well. I think she pushed him out of the way, and then ushered us back into the car really fast, okay? She was furious, which was a phrase she used when she was furious, especially since I had no clue what had happened and I could give her no explanation of what was going on, okay? You know, I don't think I ever discussed the story with my mom after it happened that day, but it's been embedded in my memory for close to 60 years. Move 33 years later, how you can help your children, no matter what age. I was trying to get tenure in 1997, and I sent off what I thought was a beautiful paper for publication. 2 reviewers loved it, but sadly one reviewer, what we in the field call evil reviewer number 3, criticized the paper, claiming it had nothing original, and that all the observations were cited in a paper published in 1944 in an obscure Danish journal of embryology, okay? I had seen the paper in citations, but had never read it, and I was pretty sure that most of my colleagues had not actually read it. So I searched all the biolibrary archives in Israel, but the journal was nowhere to be found. Knowing my mom could find anything and solve any problem, I immediately phoned her, somewhat in a panic. I asked her to call UCSF, Stanford, and UC Berkeley libraries urgently to find the journal and get me a copy of the paper ASAP. The next day she called me back. The good news was UC Berkeley has the journal. But the bad news was that since we have no library account, they cannot photocopy the article for us. The next day my mom called the same UC Berkeley librarian back. She convinced her to take the journal off campus, photocopy it at Krishna Copies at her own expense, and then fax it to my mom, who then faxes it to me, okay? My mom rewarded the librarian with her ultimate gift of goodwill, which was a box of See's candy. I then read the paper and saw that all our youth studies and theirs were almost completely complementary, almost no overlap. Figure by figure, I itemized and compared our results to this classic 1944 paper, which was a great paper. I sent back the rebuttal letter, and reviewer 3 had nothing left to say. Deflated. Paper accepted, and I get tenure. Thanks, Mom. My mom and I used to go at it a little when I was younger. My dad would always negotiate the peace. The day my dad died, without any words, we mutually stopped all our petty bickering. On May 13, 2000, our relationship changed, and we forged a cooperative partnership for nearly 25 years. My mom was a young 63 when my dad passed away. Initially, my only required task or job was to manage the retirement finances as my father had requested. I went from 0 to 100 on a very fast learning curve initially, and I had to dodge right away the 2000-2001 crash, the 2006-07 crash, and other major dives in the stock market along the way, which anybody that invests knows. And remember, this isn't my official profession. My mom, to her unbelievable credit, never asked a question that was critical or raised any doubts on my financial skills, ever. She had full confidence in my decisions without waver. Occasionally she would joke, "Am I still solvent?" when the stock market news was grim. Just a don't worry answer from me, and we were off to other topics of discussion. The only time she ever got angry with me was once when I was complaining about how I had missed a few obvious opportunities to do better. This irked her to no end, and in her usual take-no-prisoner attitude, she raised her voice and said something like, "Stop beating yourself up. Don't be such a big baby. You can't get it right all the time." That was my mom, protecting me from myself. My mother was in a lot of physical and discomfort and pain in 2024, but luckily we had milestones. We had births of 2 great-grandchildren to keep her motivated to stay with us. The whole last period she tried to protect me, knowing she was dying but not complaining too much in comparison to her overall physical decline. My last major conversation with her was the Shabbat morning 6 days before she died. She had been relatively spry in the morning, eating a very good breakfast, and Chaim Goldman visited, and while bedridden, Me'era, Chaim, and I had a very funny and interesting, lively conversation. My mother was really engaged. Later that day, when we were alone in the apartment, she asked me, "Am I dying?" And I had always had promised to her not to lie. So I said, "Yes, you're dying." And obviously she knew and I knew, but this was her way of getting me to tell her and not put the burden on her telling me and making me feel bad. That's how I figured it, knowing my mom. She was trying to protect me and get me ready by making me admit the bitter truth. She said she felt weak with no energy, saddened by the loss of her body. I explained to her again that she had multiple catastrophic health issues, which is a good summation of what she had, and there was nothing to do, and that she is no spring chicken, okay? Not missing a beat, with my mom's perfect timing and self-deprecating humor, she answered, "That's true, I'm an old hen." That was the last real conversation that we had together. My mom's personality traits. As a scientist, we have mentors throughout our early career. My mom was my first mentor. As a child, I clocked a lot of time with her. It was the 1960s. My dad worked hard to build a law practice, and we clocked a lot of time together. We had our special places to eat when my dad would work late. We would go to a Mexican place called Jalisco's, which is now in Campbell, a tradition that has lasted over 65 years. After my dad passed away, this became our traditional first meal place to go with my mom when we came from Israel. Literally, we get off the plane, dump the suitcases off, and go there. And I always like to have these special places to go just with my mom. And I appreciated it even as a kid and even as a grown-up. My mom mentored me not only as her only son, but a bit as her daughter, too. I can set a table that the King of England would feel comfortable dining upon. I was in the kitchen at a young age, and still at this older age I'm in the kitchen, in charge of salad preparation for dinner. That was my job. I had the yard to table cherry tomato harvest every night, and all the prep work for the salad. My mom read incessantly to me as a child, and I caught a re-glimpse of this with my boys, and even with my grandchildren. She encouraged me to read when all I wanted to do was watch TV. My mom taught me how to look at everything in this world through her keen aesthetic eye, how to look and appreciate art, how to correctly display art in your house, to coordinate color when you dress, even if your personal style is what I call nouveau schlump. I loved how my mother dressed elegantly in her green multitudes, and as a result, I'm wearing green in her honor. She taught me how to shop for clothes for men, women, boys, and girls. When she was well, we would go on shopping pilgrimages to our favorite places around here and shop until you drop. Pre-internet, my mom would literally find any weird things we requested by catalog or by telephone. It was amazing. And she developed great internet savvy, and not just for buying when the internet came into play. When she arrived in Israel, suitcases full of goodies, it was the only time I ever felt in my life like I was celebrating Christmas. In the early days of e-commerce, I had a conversation with her about trying to buy something online that was hard to find. She looked at me quizzically, as if I was a bit of an idiot, and poking fun at me, she said, "You know that Amazon just doesn't sell books." In another generation, my mom easily could have been an engineer. She could read instructions and put things together, fix things around the house, unlike my dad. I saw her picking Jimmy locks to break into places on numerous occasions. She had great hand-eye coordination when she was young, designing and creating magnificent beaded flowers. Wait a minute, I just lost my place. Ornate needlepoint artwork and Jewish motifs. What's on my head, my kippah on my head. And personal sewed hamsas for each grandson. For living in Israel, my mom gave me an important skill set toolbox that was unique to her personality. She taught me to completely disrespect authority, and that you need to push back sometimes and even raise your voice now and then. Unlike my dad, this trait comes in very handy in Israel, in the army, dealing with bureaucracies, and the day-to-day function of our somewhat vocal society. She had extensive research skills herself, using databases and her practical know-how to create extensive family trees online for her family, my dad's family, and her friend and partner for 9 years, Steve Zeman. Via these trees and her extensive genealogical research, we discovered numerous lost members of our family. Many, on my dad's side and my mom's side. Disrespect for authority / critical thinking are huge assets in science. She taught me how not to take any result automatically at face value, whether good or bad. Look critically at everything and try to find the true meaning of your observation. My mom always encouraged inquisitive curiosity and wanted me to be a scientist. She never really told me that when I was young, but she told me that later, when all I wanted to do really was be the next Willie Mays. My mom had an acerbic wit with excellent timing in her quips until the end, and she was not afraid to tell you the truth as she saw it. My mom and dad lived in the identical philosophy that you treat all people with the same respect and equality, whether they be the person that cleans your house, gardens your yard, or is a Nobel Prize winner. I was blessed to have excellent mentors in my career, and my mom was the first. And the last part is Jewish values. By personal example, I saw how my mom lived and breathed tzedakah. Every year at tax time, I discovered a new longer list of charities that expanded annually, every year. She loved helping people in need, and this sparked her interest to help the Russian Soviet Jewish immigrants in the 1970s that were coming to this area. She dragged me to anti-Soviet Union demonstrations when I was 10 years old, volunteering me, somewhat against my will, to help her as when I was a non-cooperative teenager. She made it crystal clear to me as a 10-year-old that the difference between me, not her, me, it was her too, but me, and them was that her grandfather was so poor and miserable in Russia that he had luckily fled the Russian-Japan War in 1904 to Toledo, Ohio. She would say that the fate of poverty saved us from either being a pile of ashes in Lithuania, or in a best-case scenario, a persecuted Jew looking to leave the Soviet Union then. My mom did not mince words with me as a child. My mom encouraged my involvement in Jewish tradition and Israel activities. As a 5-year-old sitting in a shopping cart in the Safeway parking lot, I remember someone asking me what I want for Christmas. And I replied, "We don't celebrate Christmas. We celebrate Hanukkah, the first war of religious freedom." The woman was a bit surprised to hear this from a little tyke sitting in the grocery cart, okay? Because of my mother's fervor to instill in me Jewish values and identification, it is no surprise I moved to Israel over 45 years ago, with her blessing and constant encouragement. My amazing mother made over 100 trips to Israel in her lifetime. I want to thank all those who supported me and my mother since her move to Israel. I appreciate how much Meira, our boys, and everyone of our nuclear family in Israel gave so much love and support. In San Jose, I want to thank my friends, brothers, David and Chaim Goldman, and Irina Belova for all the visits to San Jose and TLC, especially during the pandemic. I want to thank Marta Ortiz for managing and keeping a watchful, protective eye on my mom's house. Oh, I just lost my place. For keeping a watchful, protective eye on my mom's house in her absence. Marta's loyalty and love for my mom have no limits. Finally, I want to thank our 24/7 caregiver in Israel, Delreen Mila. With loyal devotion and love to my mother and our family, Delreen gave the best possible care to my mother in the last 2 years of her life. Delreen has a spunky, upbeat, positive personality, and my mother and Delreen had a relationship of mutual admiration and love to one another. She took devoted care of my mom for nearly 2 years. Thank you so much, Delreen. Yesterday morning, Meira did a Qigong meditation exercise with me. You imagine yourself floating on a cloud, and then you start to let things go onto the neighboring clouds around you. Timing was perfect. I saw my mom on an adjacent cloud floating away, looking energetic and healthy, dressed fashionably in green and smiling, and waving and blowing kisses, saying shalom, goodbye. Mom, I did my best. I asked for mechila v'slicha for anything I intentionally did wrong. I love you so much. Yeh zichrech baruch.
I actually have two things, one that my sisters in Israel wrote and one that I wrote. It's a tribute in memory of Barbara Frank, or as we used to call her, Safti Baba. As you probably know, Dale is an only son and a very devoted one to his parents and family. I met Barbara and Al about 44 years ago. Dale and I were just dating, but they invited me to join them on their vacation trip to Eilat. I remember being very young and naive, and Barbara couldn't stop laughing when in the morning she discovered that I made up my bed in the hotel. We connected during this trip, especially when we had to hide under the car in the heat of the day in Eilat for a few hours after we were stuck on our way back. During and after our wedding in Jerusalem, I met and got to know all their good, wonderful friends, who 14 of them came to Israel to participate in our wedding. Barbara and Al always treated me like a daughter and became part of my big family in Israel. They loved the huge seders held in my sisters Ahuva and Zion's house. Everyone waited for the frogs that Barbara used to throw when we came to the part of the frog plague. I want to share with you two special stories about my mother-in-law, Safti Barbara. She and Ruth Sporer took me on our first visit here as a married young couple to San Francisco, the city, to make my palette of colors by Suzanne. It was a very interesting and special day together. After that, Barbara always carried a copy of my colorful palette in her purse and used it when she shopped for many beautiful clothes for me. And boy, she did. Another short story that shows her special character. I just got my driving license in Israel, and she was driving with me and our first baby, Noam. And as so typical in Israel, someone was honking at me and got me even more nervous. So she showed me what she usually does. She just turned to him with a big smile and waved at him as if she knows him. She told me it always works for her. The honking driver thinks she knows him, and usually it embarrasses and confuses and surprises, and he stops honking. I think we can all learn from that how to neutralize someone that doesn't treat you well. Safti, we will all miss your visits to Israel with full suitcases full of books and toys and clothes and video cassettes that you recorded and clothes that you carefully shopped so well before coming. I want to thank you specifically for raising such a great, loving, and caring son, for loving and caring all of us in our big family. And thanks for giving me much love and all our 3 boys and their children and families. We will miss you so much. Now I'm going to read what my big sister Ahuva and my sisters Judith and Vital, and was translated from Hebrew by me and Google Translate. A tribute for Barbara Elul of Tafshin Pei. Barbara, the woman and the legend. Almost half a century has passed since Barbara and Al Frank joined our family, the Melamed Cohen family. Yes, half a century ago, 44 years, we met the parents of Dale, our Chatan. A typical American couple, love Jews in general, and the state of Israel in particular, a true Zionists. We immediately felt a mutual chemistry. How much affection and love they radiated onto us. We, a wounded Israeli family from Jerusalem, a family whose roots are originally from Persia, Iran, over 120 years ago, and whose fate is firmly rooted in the rise of the states of Israel. And they, Barbara and Al, active members of AIPAC, helping Russian Jews to integrate in the USA, they arose in us an endless curiosity for the big world, for the English language and American manners. Intercultural merge right from their deep heart, a sense of beginning to each other, acceptance and appreciations without giving up on your own. Unity without uniformity. And even the language difficulties were met with humor and jokes. Mutual affections and love prevailed between our parents, Simcha and Menashe Melamed, and Barbara and Al, and Dale's parents. At each visit of Barbara and Al, and after that Barbara alone, they brought with them the fragrance of abroad, America in small doses. Al, with wide smile, participated in trivia games, tales about trips, plays, and whatnot. And Barbara, with neat curls, interesting glasses, and clothes that were often green, taking an interest in each and every one of our big family. She gave special and generous gifts to everyone in the family. Barbara and Al took an active part in most of the smachot, or happy occasions, at our family. They also enjoyed our holidays, chagim, traditional tunes and customs. The highlight was the Seder nights in Pesach, celebrated with over 30 people around the tables. year after year. They were interested and proud of our tradition and gave us more than a taste of theirs. In dual languages of English and Hebrew, we read the Haggadah together. Every year, the children waited for the frogs that Barbara scattered to illustrate what the plague of the Makat Tzfardea is. Barbara and Al, with a big smile and laugh, participated in our tradition of green onions during the Dayenu, with running around the Seder tables and hitting each other with green onions like a whip. We all loved and will always remember Barbara's traditional famous chicken soup and matzah balls, which she made in a huge pot and served more and more. Barbara is the grandmother of Noam, Barak, and Chovav. And at the same time, there is no doubt that Barbara was a little bit the grandmother of all of us. And we were all her children, friends, and family. Rest in peace, Safti Barbara. We all loved you very much. The pleasant memories will continue among us, and so your soul will be bundled in the bundle of life. תהיה נשמתך צרורה בצרור החיים. Thank you.
As we've heard, Barbara loved being a grandmother and a great-grandmother. She had the ability to connect with people across generations, and she was so fortunate to be able to spend the last couple of years in Tel Aviv close to her grandchildren and be able to know her 6 great-grandchildren. It's my honor to invite Barbara's grandsons, Noam, Barak, and Chovav, to share memories of their Safti.
Hello, everyone. During the past 2 years, Safti lived in Tel Aviv, and I had the privilege of living a 5-minute walk from her house. This enabled my kids to build a very meaningful and loving relationship with her, and they each asked me to read what they wrote about her. So I'll start with Yuval, who is 10. Safti always remembered us and did not forget us once. She loved playing with us, and she was very loving. I loved coming over to her house to eat sushi lunch on Wednesdays. And I still love her very much. And Zohar, who was 8, wrote, "She was very nice, and from the second I knew her, I knew that I loved her. She will always have a place in my heart, and I will miss her very much. I loved eating Shabbat dinners at her house. I wish that we had more time together." I loved my Safti very much. She was my last living grandparent, and I had a very deep and meaningful connection with her. Even though she lived for most of her life across the globe, we were very close. I saw her at least twice a year on the Chagim, and we spent many summers in her most wonderful house in San Jose and in Lake Tahoe. During the rest of the time, she would frequently call us on the phone, even when transatlantic phone calls were very expensive. She was very invested in building a relationship with her grandchildren. And I feel very lucky for that. I learned many things from my Safti. She gave me the love for plants and gardening. I remember many joint trips to nurseries for her backyard in San Jose and for plants in her house in Jerusalem. She loved Israel and was always eager to explore Jerusalem together. After the rain, she would take me and Barak to search for uprooted mosaics in the old city of Jerusalem when I was a kid. By her example, I learned about the importance of Zionism and the love of Israel. I learned from her about generosity and about how to love someone without wanting anything in return. I learned from her about the magic of strong black coffee and about the wonders of dark chocolate in frequent amounts. By her example, I learned about the importance of taking care of our elders with compassion when they need us, as she did for many of our family elders. Until almost the end, she avidly read the New York Times and watched CNN and was always informed about current events in Israel and the world. It was a great delight for me to talk politics with her. She always wanted to live life at its fullest, and she was an optimist, and she had the most amazing way of reinventing herself after tragedy struck. After my Sabi Al died, she tried J-Date for a while, and eventually rekindled her past relationship with Steve Zeman, and spent almost a decade of a loving relationship with her Perek Bet, her second romance. Till the very end, she never lost her fierce passion for life and her sense of humor. When I visited her in her house in Tel Aviv, I would ask her how she was doing, and she would half smile and say to me, "I feel like shit." But she kept plugging along. She was always tech savvy and was constantly active on Facebook, boasting a cell phone, tablet, and laptop from the very beginning of the digital revolution. I guess that's how it is when your grandma lives in Silicon Valley. She was a great shopper and would always find the best things, constantly on the lookout for a cool new gadget or a t-shirt for me. During the last 2 years, she was the glue of our family, being the focal point for many Shabbat dinners and lazy Shabbat afternoons. I feel grateful that my kids had a chance to get to know her and build a loving relationship with her. Not many kids can say that they had that. Finally, I want to say to my Safti that till your last day, I loved you with all my heart, even when you were a grouch. You were one of the rocks in my life, and I feel blessed to have had 41 years with you, and especially these last 2 years together. Your memory will forever live on in my heart and soul. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for coming to say goodbye to our beloved Safti Barbara. To those of you who do not know me, I'm Barak, Safti's second grandson, or as she liked to say, grandson number 2. I'm married to Orit, and I'm father to Alma, Oz, Roi, and Bafla the dog, all of which wish they could be here and send their love and smoochy kisses to Safti from Israel and miss her greatly. Safti lived and loved life to the fullest, experiencing it in a complete, non-apologetic manner. No one laughed harder from a joke, got more annoyed from politicians, or owned the color green and chamsot like you did. If you were doing it, you were all in. She had a unique sparkle in her eye, a balance of wit, chutzpah, and shovavut, which in Hebrew means graceful mischievousness. Traits I already see living on in my kids. One time, when we were talking about dealing with Israeli drivers, Safti told me that whenever they would honk at her, she would roll down the window, look them straight in the eye, give them a wide smile, and wave fondly. I remember that as a teenager, I struggled to understand the underlying logic to this approach, to which Safti explained that it would make them think they know you, or just plainly confuse them. But one way or another, they will stop honking. It was a valuable life lesson I took and apply to this day in all aspects of life, on how maintaining a positive attitude and outlook, mixed with a dash of humor, can lead to de-escalation of sensitive situations. Safti, you're also an outstanding storyteller who could recreate to the finest level of detail events that happened decades ago, as if they happened yesterday. Your first date with Sabi, which you told me about on one of our countless drives to Tahoe, tracking down your long-lost relatives from Cuba, washing my dad's mouth out with soap, the story of the bill or the bear, and so many more legendary tales I will cherish forever. My Safti was one of the strongest people I know. When talking with her during Sabi's Shiva, I remember her telling me how she was sad and upset with his too early passing, but at the same time stating that she won't sink into depression, because that won't do any good to anyone. It was that approach that later on led her to be one of the pioneers of her generation on JDate, before dating apps were cool, and helped her and us enjoy her rekindled relationship with Steve Zeman. Safti, you loved your family so much. Even towards the end, when communication was scarce, you would always light up when your grandchildren and great-grandchildren came in for one of your famous smoochy kisses. It's amazing to think that even with an entire U.S., Atlantic Ocean, and Mediterranean Sea between us most of the time, you were always such a dominant presence in our lives and had a pivotal part in their shaping. I can't even start to describe how meaningful and joyous the day you would land in Ben Gurion Airport before a 3 to 4 week visit. How exciting that was for me as a child, teenager, and grown-up, and how much we loved spending countless summers with you and Sabi at San Jose and Tahoe, which were always packed with fun, adventures, shopping sprees, your famous grilled cheese sandwiches in the family room, and above all, hours of quality time together. And of course, I can't talk about your love of family without going into the one-of-a-kind relationship you had with your son, my Abba. You two always shared such a special bond that grew even stronger throughout the years. Abba, I'm at awe from how you took care of Safti, especially during the last challenging 3 years. So much devotion, caring, love, and humor. And of course, cooking her the best food, something she was able to enjoy up to the very end. Thanks to you, your dedication, and the difficult decisions you had to make along the way. You aced them all. Safti, before I say goodbye for now, I want to thank you for the last 2 years. I know they weren't easy on you, and that it was hard leaving the house, loving community, and chosen family you built here over 6 decades in San Jose. But I'm so grateful for your brave decision, because thanks to it, we got to enjoy so many more Shabbat dinners together. Birthday celebrations, casual visits, 2 more family vacations. You got to see Yuval, Zohar, Alma, and Oz grow in real time and build meaningful relationships with them. You were able to dance at Chovav and Ayelet's wedding, be there for Rohi's birth and Brit, and you even stuck around long enough to meet Gaia, Chovav and Ayelet's most recent and precious addition to the beautiful family you matriarched. A few days ago, you got on a plane and embarked on the journey you knew like the back of your hand, from Israel to San Jose, for one last time. This time, for the first time in 25 years, you even get to join Sabi upon your return, something I find comforting. I love you forever and miss you so much already. Thank you so much for being my Safti.
I want to start by saying thank you to my dad. You always took such good care of my Granny Goose. And you always did what was best for her. My deep relationship with my Safti had evolved so much over the years. I stand here today feeling like I lost 10 different close relationships. As a little boy, I remember massive excitement and butterflies in my stomach each time you would come and visit us in Israel. First things first, she'd open her suitcase and fulfill my deep childhood addiction of Legos. It would blow her mind how quickly the Legos would get constructed. You were so proud of me. Every year, when the school year ended, I would get on a plane and spend a few weeks with Softy. Many times it was just the two of us. Let me tell you, back then, it was not an easy task to take care of an energetic little boy like me, plus a super hyper Zach off his meds. You were always down to ride a scooter, play some mini golf, shop, and of course take a trip to Tahoe. Until today, I don't know how you were able to survive me and Zach over and over after getting a sugar rush from the dessert section at Fresh Choice. She always made me feel like I could say anything on my mind, no matter how crazy, strange, or impolite it was. On the other hand, in restaurants, she would always nudge me to put a napkin on my lap and eat with a knife and not with my fingers. No offense to my parents, but to the most part, she taught me all I knew about table manners. Not many people can say this about their grandparents, but besides the fact that she was my granny goose, she was also my friend. Her top 3 characteristics that I will miss the most: her funky style, her unique sense of humor, and how she would say and do whatever she thinks, no matter what. She always accepted me for who I was. She never judged or told me what to do. And she always had a way of showing me a different perspective of things. My friends from Israel always saw her as the cool softa that is overly active on Facebook. Many of my friends, my close friends, even got to share experiences with her. After my army service, me and a couple of buddies planned a road trip across the U.S. Softy hosted us with open arms, sharing stories about the gold diggers in J-Date. When I worked in Florida, a hurricane came for us, and she immediately told me and my buddies to come and stay with her for as long as we needed. As a student in college, she spent a night in my bachelor pad in Herzliya. The only time Softy would get mad at me is when I smoked cigarettes. Although Softy never smoked cigarettes, she would always tell me to stop immediately. A couple months ago, when I finally stopped, I was so happy to tell her, and she was so proud. Over the years, I always wanted her to come and live with us in Israel, so I could see her whenever I wanted. About 2 years ago, that dream finally came true. We got to spend so much time together, countless hours of news watching, random midweek lunches, and many Shabbat dinners. We got to have our last dance together at me and Ayelet's wedding. A week before you passed, you got to meet Gaia and give her 2 smoochy kisses. I just want to thank you for all the experiences we shared, for all the mac and cheese you made, for all I learned from you, and for taking such good care of me over the years. I want to thank you for letting me take care of you when you needed, and for not giving me a hard time when I pushed you to your limit. I'm so happy we got to bring you back home. I love you, Granny Goose. You'll be with me forever.
Thank you all for sharing with so much love and honesty. A memory of Barbara that stands out to me occurred right here in the sanctuary. During services one Shabbat, I made some sort of self-disparaging remark about being vertically challenged. And Barbara came up to me afterwards and said, "You never look short to me." And for some reason, it was what I needed to hear in that moment, and it stuck with me, and I think about it all the time. Barbara taught us that we cannot be complacent. She lived by and dedicated her life to the Jewish value of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zel Hazeh. All Jews are responsible for one another. And she taught us that this value requires us to take action. Barbara taught us to roll down the window and smile. She taught us to embrace life, to get back up again, to love family and to support them and be proud of the decisions they make for themselves. Barbara Lynn Tiemann Frank, Batya Bat Chaim Uvracha, is remembered by her son Dale with his wife Meira, her grandson Noam, her grandson Barak with his wife Orit, her grandson Chovav with his wife Ayelet, and her great-grandchildren, Yuval, Zohar, Alma, Oz, Roi, and Gaia. Yehi Zichra Baruch. May her memory be a blessing. Following this service, the graveside burial will take place at Beth David Cemetery, which is in Oak Hill Memorial Park. So there'll be a procession directly to the cemetery. Following that, there'll be a meal of condolence back here at Sinai. And then there will be Shiva services tonight through Thursday night at 7 p.m. At Barbara's home. And the family will be sitting Shiva there and receiving visitors during the week. At this time, I'd like to invite all of us to please rise and invite the Paul to please rise for El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim shochen b'mromim מצאי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת בתיה בת חיים וברכה שהלכה לעולמה בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה אנא בעל רחמים הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בתורה חיים את נשמתה אדוני ונחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To the soul of Batya Bat Chaim Uvracha, Barbara Lynn Tiemann Frank, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say amen. This time I'd like to invite the pallbearers to please come forward. We begin the procession with the pallbearers and the family going first, and then the rest of us can follow, and then we'll regather at the cemetery. Dwell in the shelter of the Most High, and abide in the protection of Shaddai. Say of Adonai, my refuge and stronghold, my God in whom I trust. Adonai will save you from the fowler's trap and from the destructive place. God will shelter you, you will find refuge. For God's fidelity is certain. Do not fear the terror by night, or the arrows that fly by day, the plague that stalks in darkness, or the scourge that ravages